as you know, I have been gagged by a federal judge essentially since the time that these charges were brought against me. So I've had no ability to defend myself while the fake news like CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post unleashed a tsunami of disinformation and smear against me. So it is really great to finally have my voice back. I got a lot of catching up to do because for a year, those media outlets and some even worse kept saying, Roger Stone will be charged with treason. Roger Stone will be charged with espionage. Roger Stone will be charged with the receipt of stolen emails. Roger Stone was the link between the Russians and Donald Trump. And of course, none of those things are true. None of those things have anything to do with, frankly, the immaterial charges that were brought against me. But most Americans don't even know what I was found guilty of.
Roger, I think a lot of people were shocked that the judge issued a gag order and basically said that you could not defend yourself. It seems like a trampling of your basic fundamental constitutional rights of free speech. Just because you are accused or even convicted of a crime, it doesn't mean that you can't talk about yourself. Now, your attorney may tell you to be quiet, but I was shocked by that. But I want to go back to the FBI raid at your house. 29 agents in full SWAT gear burst into your house at 6 o'clock in the morning last January. I mean, this was overkill that was unbelievable, and a CNN crew was outside, just happened to be on your lawn when all this happened, and said it was their news instincts that led them there. Take us back to that day.
Yeah, it was really quite extraordinary. I mean, first of all, it's important to recognize that my attorneys had spoken to the special counsel's office lawyers the very previous day. So they were fully aware of the fact that I was represented. I have no previous criminal record. Although I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, I don't own a firearm, and I did not at that time, nor now, have a valid passport. The chances of my being a flight risk are infinitesimal since for a year, CNN had been putting my mug all over television, telling people that I was a Russian traitor. By the way, my family members were mowed down by Russian tanks in Budapest in 1956. So that's not very likely. In any event, they arrived in 17 armored vehicles. There was a government helicopter overhead. They had a canine unit of dogs, which is really scary. They brought this enormous battering ram up to my front door. They completely surrounded the house. On the canal where I used to live, there were 2 amphibious units. And all of this for the arrest of a 67-year-old vigorous man for nonviolent process crimes. Now, I know from the security camera footage that the CNN crew arrived exactly 11 minutes before the FBI and set up 25 feet from my front door. What I didn't know then, but I know now, is the FBI had sealed the street from all other media and spectators. Only CNN was given this exclusive. This was obviously meant to defame me with the public. All they had to do was call my lawyer and tell me I was being charged, and I certainly would have turned myself in, and I could have saved the taxpayers, I hope you're sitting down, $1.1 million for this raid on my home.
See, I think that's what people need to understand, that this was a simple matter, Roger, that your attorney gets a phone call, say, we want to arraign Mr. Stone, and that would have happened. And that would be the way that this would typically be handled, unless you were a drug lord and you were sitting on top of very sophisticated weapons, which you weren't. The whole thing smacks of government overkill. You've said, and I think it's probably true, you just picked the wrong person to support for president. You picked Donald Trump. You've known him a long time. There is talk that he may give you a pardon. And I think a lot of people, including me, hope that he does. How's that coming along?
Well, as you know, the judge denied our motion last week for a new trial based on the egregious conduct of the forewoman of the jury who lied about her anti-Stone and anti-Trump social media history in 2019 and then tried to delete all of that to hide her bias. no lawyer who's read that decision takes it seriously, whether it's Jonathan Turley on the left, Andrew Napolitano, even Alan Dershowitz. I have obviously now, specifically in that order, I have been ordered to turn myself in to the Federal Bureau of Prisons next Thursday. I have an appeal, obviously, and if I am required to appeal, I will. I think there's many flaws in my trial. I have excellent appeal lawyers, but Governor, they cost $1 million. I have gone through every resource I have in my first trial. So I am praying fervently for a pardon. This is in the hands of God. As you know, I back at the beginning of the year, I reaffirmed my faith in Jesus Christ. It was the single smartest thing I've ever done. It's up there with marrying my wife, because it has brought me a sense of serenity and peace about this whole thing. Donald Trump is a great man. I've wanted him to be president since 1988. He has both empathy and compassion and mercy and a great sense of fairness. And I think he has, based only on his public comments and tweets, he's been outraged about the bias and the corruption of my trial. So I am praying that he will save me from what I believe, at 67 years old, in the middle of the corona pandemic, would be a death sentence.
Roger, you mentioned your faith and a reaffirmation of that. I know that there are people who are going to be cynical and say, yeah, Roger's having some jailhouse religion. But I read what you said. I was touched by it. It was not the shallow at all. It was a very honest, forthcoming statement of how you felt reconnected to Jesus Christ. So recap for us, what has changed in Roger Stone's life as a result of that renewal of your faith?
Well, Governor, I was born a Roman Catholic. I received all my sacraments in that church. That is one of the Huckabee fans here who's a dog. I admit that I had fallen away from the church, and I had fallen away from his path. This entire experience is really a wrenching experience. I have been destroyed financially. My wife is not only hearing impaired, she's also ill. By taking away my free speech rights, they take away my right to make a living. I had lost my home. I had lost my savings. I had lost my insurance. I lost my car. I'm basically indigent, other than the debt that I owe the IRS that I was whittling down. And I was in a period of just enormous anger and turmoil. I couldn't sleep. And then a friend of mine, Reverend Randy Coggins, who's a very young, extremely dynamic evangelist preacher, and Reverend Mark Burns, who's an African-American pastor that I met during the Trump campaign, both urged me to take Christ into my heart and ask him to come into my life again and guide me, because, as they both said, God will never abandon you. God will always protect you. And I thought about it, but then I had arrangements to meet with Franklin Graham when he visited Florida in March for one of his extraordinary meetings, revivals, and I had a few minutes to pray with him. And I told him what my life was like, the turmoil I was going through, the doubt, the fear, the anger. And I asked for his help, and he was very forthright. He said, "You don't need my help, son. You need his help. If you will simply confess your sins and get right with Jesus, trust me, everything will work out. He will never abandon you." So then I went to his revival, which was an extraordinarily impressive thing. Reverend Graham is a powerful speaker. As a young man, I had an opportunity to both meet and see Billy Graham preach. I think he's one of the greatest men of the century. But I'm not taking anything away from Franklin Graham. He was extremely effective. And there came a time in his remarks when he said, now is a time that any of you in this crowd of 2,000 can make a new breast with Christ, can confess your sins, can recommit your life to a life of faith, to agree to walk in God's path, and it will change your life. And I don't know, maybe 400 other people stood up, but I felt the calling to stand up. I wasn't embarrassed about it. It just seemed like the right thing to do. I recited a pledge. And Governor, I have to tell you, it was like a cement block had been lifted from my chest. I left that park with a sense of peace and serenity that I hadn't felt in a year. Reverend Graham was nice enough to send me a Bible with some annotated sections that I revisit virtually every day. I returned to my local Catholic church, St. Anthony's. I struck up a friendship with Father Michael Grady there. I don't believe all the dogma of the Catholic Church, but they've got all the fundamentals right. They believe that Jesus Christ is the only begotten Son of Man. They believe in redemption. So I feel at home in the church of my parents and grandparents. And Father Grady has given me great advice. Here's the most difficult one. The people who came after me, who have virtually destroyed my life, are the exact same people who tried to destroy the president. They did it in the phony Russian collusion hoax. They did it in Ukraine. They did it in my trial. But the Bible requires us to forgive them, not to seek vengeance. It's the single hardest thing that I have to do. I grapple with it every day. I pray for guidance with it every day. I believe many of these people are both corrupt and evil, but I refuse to hate them. It's the hardest thing about being a Christian. In the meantime, I don't know what the future brings. People who want to help me can go to stonedefensefund.com. I have to raise the money for a potential appeal should I need one. I'm praying that the president will do the right thing. I think it is, I've always believed that God put him in this place at this time to be our leader because of his incredible courage and his incredible independence. I saw this earlier than most. People don't understand how tough Donald Trump is. I worked for Richard Nixon. I worked for Bob Dole, both very tough guys, both very great patriots. Donald Trump is tougher than both of them. When he sets his mind on a goal, on a worthy goal, you will not get him off it. This job, Governor, is costing him billions of dollars. He didn't do this for fame or for recognition or to burnish the brand or for the ceremonial pomp and circumstance of being president. He did it for us, just like Jesus Christ died on the cross for us. He did this to save his country. His reelection is absolutely vital. I want to be around to help do that. I am praying for executive relief.
Roger, I appreciate your candor. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to say to our audience, I hope you will join me in praying for Roger's release, his pardon, his vindication. You can find all of his books on Amazon, and if you'd like to sign a petition asking President Trump to pardon Roger Stone, you can visit freerogerstone.com. Already 400,000 people plus have done so.